and welcome in to another episode of Heat of the Moment. My name is Micah. I am joined, as always, by my fellow host and friend Lino. We are excited to be back with you guys. We were both doing some traveling, so we missed out on a ton of NBA news, really, and some Heat news. So we're excited to cover all of that with you guys. We're going to spend a little time on a few different things, some trades that didn't happen, the draft, free agency. So a lot of fun stuff to get into. Don't want to spend too much more time on the intro, so we'll just go in chronological order. The major thing we missed longest ago was Kevin Durant did not get traded to the Miami Heat. He was instead traded to the Houston Rockets, primarily for a package featuring the 10th overall pick, which became Kaman Malawash, a center from Duke, who is very good according to draft people, and Jalen Green, the shooting guard. I'm sure everyone's very familiar with from Houston. So Lino, we can get into what Houston got or what Phoenix got. Was it better than what Miami offered? But just as a Heat fan, when this news broke, kind of what were your feelings initially, and then have they changed as time has passed?
I think you just start to get diminishing returns on reactions to stuff like this. It's just another superstar name gets thrown out there with Miami Heat being one of the suitors and a swing and a miss as always. So, a level of disappointment that we didn't get him. Although I do believe the fan base was kind of split on whether or not we should have him. And I could definitely see the pros and cons either way. But I personally was very excited to see Kevin Durant in a Miami Heat jersey. Regardless of what the results might have actually been, I thought the process would have been a pretty interesting experience. Just having Kevin Durant on your team is always a good time. I think people were pretty down on a player just because he's older. But if we look at his stats, we could see that Kevin Durant is still Kevin Durant in all the ways that matter. So I was really excited for the opportunity to have him on our team and disappointed, but not surprised that we didn't get him. And hearing about the trade package, I thought that we put together a decent offer, but one that just wasn't going to beat the offer they got from Houston. If when it comes to players, when it comes to draft compensation, I think ultimately, if you're not willing to give up multiple firsts or have really the guys that the team that's selling is looking for, then you're just not going to have success there. So on to the next and the next and the next. But, when you heard the news that we weren't getting KD, was there disappointment or was there even a hint of relief that maybe you thought that was the wrong direction anyways?
It's funny. We've talked a lot on the show. I've been very torn on if that's the right move, and then the whole conversation of giving him a 2-year extension on top of what's remaining on his contract. There's the whole analytical versus fan side of it was tearing me apart. But when that notification dropped, I was genuinely very disappointed. I was like, dang. Not that it's not like it could end up being for the best, but nothing I don't think that exciting is going to happen until the season starts. That was probably
Yeah.
the Heat's best chance to really make a splash. Now, would it have been worth anything? Could they have made the finals? Maybe in a weekend East, but we're not sure of that. And of course, that would depend heavily on Durant's health. So I was disappointed. I know a lot of Heat fans were upset after they heard kind of what was our trade package, what wasn't included. It sounded like the Heat never really wanted to include Jovic in this, which I think
Mhm.
is interesting. Jovic has good potential for sure. He's not the type of prospect I would have guessed the Heat would keep out of Kevin Durant conversations. But again, this isn't 31-year-old Kevin Durant. It sounds like the Heat took the approach to these trade negotiations, just kind of like, hey, it'd be cool if you guys are willing to take, a pretty minimal offer, then that's fine. We'll give you the 20th pick, Hawkes, Haywood, Wiggins, and if you're cool with that, maybe we can make something happen. But yeah, that
Yeah,
didn't
I
happen.
think me and Morgan have been house shopping. Well, Morgan is my wife for listeners who are new to the pod. We've been looking at houses this past weekend, mostly for fun, but things just started to get randomly serious. But in the conversations around house shopping, we've talked about, I think a good sign that we really love a house and we should move on a house is if we'd be really sad if we didn't end up getting it. And that's kind of what it's like trying to decide if you really want Kevin Durant on the team, it's like, if he goes somewhere else, how are you going to feel? And it felt pretty bad that he went to Houston and not us. And so that's probably a sign in itself. Maybe it's just the desperation talking, the deep pit in my stomach that fears running it back again, as it very well may look like we will do. It was a spark of hope that maybe Kevin Durant would come by and at least make things fun to watch for a season or two. And now we'll just have to see what the Heat have in store for us.
When Brian Windhorst and different people have gone on ESPN, and I trust Windhorst reporting about as much as anybody, but they have made it seem like a lot of these teams, the Heat, the Knicks, even Houston, in terms of what they're actually willing to give up for Durant, are trying to conserve assets because they're hoping a Giannis trade request is on the horizon. What's your reaction to when you hear, we don't know for sure, but let's say potentially the Heat kind of held back on Durant offers in hopes that they could have all of their assets ready to go if Giannis does request a trade?
I think that is probably a half baked idea in the sense that I don't think Giannis is going to leave Milwaukee. If I had to make a bet, I'd say he finishes his career there, for better or for worse. It just, from what we know about Giannis, that just kind of seems to be, if they're willing to promise him enough, like his family's happy there, he can pretty much, anything he says goes there. Like, you just, some intangible things you just can't trade away. I do think it's the right idea, though, that these teams are waiting to see what could be there in 2026, either at the trade deadline this year or in the next free agency, because 2026 is not only a great free agency, it's also a great draft. There's a lot of talent in that draft. And so collecting assets and being ready to make a big move next season probably makes more sense than trying to make a splash this season, where clearly people don't have cap space. Players that you would want are not available. Players' contracts aren't up. The players whose contracts have expired are not really the players you want to make a big splash for. It's just not an ideal year, except there's several organizations out there who need to have movement or their fan bases are going to set them on fire. And particularly the Miami Heat, because the fans are exhausted. From the franchise perspective, I definitely understand that this is not really the year to make a big move. And next year is obviously a much better year to try to do something big and to throw all our chips in right now, when next year there could just be so much. And even just later this year at the trade deadline, it makes a lot of sense. It's still painful, nevertheless. Sometimes you gotta bleed out something, but it still hurts. So we'll see. I'm walking into this season with a little bit of grace, knowing that the options weren't great and we missed out on probably the most exciting one already.
Yeah, the Giannis stuff, I feel like I would feel better about if there wasn't a name attached to it. Like, if the
Mhm.
report was just the Heat are trying to conserve assets for a star that's closer to their timeline, or they feel like that could help them win for a long time, something like that, I think I'd feel better about. Giannis's
Yeah.
name being attached to it specifically frustrates me a little bit. And again, this is Brian Windhorst reporting, could just be him reading tea leaves. It doesn't mean that he feel this way. But as we talked about before in this show, it's really hard to envision Miami being able to acquire Giannis, even in a he demands the Heat and the Heat only kind of thing. I don't think the Bucks are just going to allow that to happen. We saw that happen with the Blazers with Dame. Like, guys can do that. It still doesn't mean they're coming here. And again, Giannis is leaving Milwaukee because, in theory, in this hypothetical situation, because they don't have enough to compete for a championship, what Miami would have to give up for Giannis would leave them unable to compete for a championship as well. So
Yeah.
that's just, we've talked about this before, but that kind of stuff, I definitely get why it frustrates Heat fans, because it's like, come on, man. Like, we can hit a couple singles. If we're just waiting for the home run pitch, we're going to get struck out. So I
Mhm.
get that. But again, I ultimately feel okay about missing out on Durant. Again, initial disappointment, but it really didn't make sense. And the back end of that contract without all our draft picks, if it would have come to that, like that would have been tough. So I get why the
Yeah.
organization waited. And, it's like we've talked about a lot. This team's probably 2 to 3 transaction cycles from starting to go in the right direction, like in a positive way.
Yeah.
but right now we don't know what those transactions are, so it's tough. But one transaction we do know that happened and is exciting is the draft, and I've actually been thinking about it a lot this offseason. The draft does bring just like an unadulterated amount of hope to fan bases because you can just cling to these young guys. You can get excited about their potential and they're just certainly yours. There's no like, okay, these three teams are interested in Dylan Harper. He's going to take meetings or this, it's just, you just draft him. He's
Mhm.
yours. You're good to go. And so for the Heat, that ended up being Kasparas Jakucionis. Now, Kasparas was a guy that was projected to go like late lottery between maybe like picks 10 and 14, something like that. He fell all the way to the Heat at 20, which is very exciting. We didn't even talk about him on our draft preview show, even though we both liked him, but we just
Mhm.
thought there's no way he would be there. And I was stoked. If no one's familiar, we'll break down his game pretty in depth, but he's a big point guard. He has some shooting ability. He can really, really pass the ball. That's definitely his like marquee feature. Seems like a competitive, tough kid. I'm excited he's in the building, and we'll break down all the aspects of his game. But how are you feeling on draft night when that happened?
Dude, I was so stoked. I actually went to go see 28 Days Later, the movie, just because I was feeling very anxious about the draft for some reason. So I was like, I might as well go terrify myself for a few hours. And I actually got out of the movie and our pick was up like maybe two picks later. When I got home, they made the pick, and it was such a good feeling because that was a guy I had watched some tape on early when I thought that we might luck into, maybe the 10th pick. Maybe we get really lucky and we get, 5 through 10 or something if the lottery balls fall our way, if we don't make the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. And so early I'd watched some tape, and then I realized we were going to be the 20th pick. And I was like, well, that was a whole waste of time, but that player is really nice. He brings so many great things to the team that I'm super excited to dive in to, but the size is definitely there. The skill set definitely fits into our needs. And you're right. It's just nice to be able to cling on to something through summer league and up through the rest of the season. If we have nothing else to pay attention to, the development and the fit of this young guy is going to lead the way. But let's talk about young Caspers here.
Yes,
Tell the
yes.
audience, everything that they need to know about this guy.
Yeah, so let's start with strengths. And Summer League is a great thing to point out because drafting a point guard for Summer League is a lot of fun because we know the ball will be in his hands a lot. And when the ball is in Cass's hands, fun things happen. This guy can pass, and this isn't like a makes quick reads. Like he can do that. He has like genuinely very impressive passing with both hands. And we're talking, skip passes, manipulating the defense, looking to the weak side corner so he can hit the roll man or vice versa. You see a lot of high level reads from this guy. And so passing, I think, is the number one marquee skill that everybody's going to look at when you look at Kasparis. And that also connects with another one of his big strengths, which is feel. This guy, whether it's a hit ahead pass, anticipating the next pass that's coming to him, attacking closeouts, just high level feel. We talked about it. It's a different type of player, but last summer league with Pella Larson, you and I are both
Mhm.
immediately like, oh, this guy just knows how to play.
It's like a
Like, and
real basketball player. Yeah.
yeah, and it jumps off the page with Kasparis. He just knows where to be. He's got a good nose for the ball. He's tough, but especially offensively, just knows how to make very quick reads. And for a Heat team that has had a struggling offense for going on almost a decade now, it's very exciting to have a real point guard in the room. I would probably categorize Kasparis as pass first, and I'm not sure the last time the Heat really had a pass first point guard. And
Yeah.
as he develops, what'd you say?
I was just saying, I was just agreeing. Yeah,
Oh, I
that's
thought you
awesome. I
said
think that
Mario. I thought you said Mario Chalmers. And I was like,
shout
pass
out to
first to
Rio.
the rim for sure. So, but I'm just like, I mean, point guard takes time to develop for sure, but the stuff he could potentially do, like with Bam and the pick and roll, I think he could help Tyler a lot because Caspers can shoot. We'll see. I think that's probably his biggest swing skill is what level of shooter he can get to, but he definitely showed the shooting ability. He can get to the free throw line. He's pretty crafty, which that would help. A good pick and roll operator, if the teams are playing him to pass, he can definitely score in the pick and roll. So those are the big areas of strength. What are some? How do you think some of those will kind of fit into next year's Heat roster and I guess future Heat rosters?
Yeah, absolutely. I was watching Cooper Moorhead's YouTube video earlier today, and he was talking a lot about how the fit is going to be really special next to Tyler, especially after and being informed by the playoff run we just had, which was quite dismal. But we saw a lot of, Tyler does have to do a lot more, playmaking and ball handling than he probably would be best fit into as far as, it'd be nice if he could just focus on scoring as much as possible, but he has to do a lot of setup that he's probably not isn't the best in his skill set. And he's a huge focal point for opponents' defenses. And so having a guy who is not only a pass first guard, but a guy who really likes to set the table for other players and also is willing to do it at a very difficult skill level. Like he is not just a make the right read kind of guy. He's kind of a create the right read kind of guy. Like he creates passes that are not exactly the ideal pass if someone normal was trying to make it, but because he has an elite skill set, he's able to make these skip passes with accuracy, with velocity. He's able to, lead his roll man into a great shot. He's able to, throw comfortable lobs that fit, the guy's athleticism. There's just things like that that I think allow the rest of our roster to really elevate, how they're able to play and without having to create so much for themselves. I think it takes pressure off of Bam in particular, who has to wear a lot of hats. He's a guard who isn't a defensive traffic cone, and so that helps Bam in its own way. In that we have the size, we have a guy who's not a great defender, but is not an ultra negative on defense. And you pair him next to a guy like Davion Mitchell, then we've got ourselves a really strong backcourt, and even powerful front court and Khalil Ware and Bam Adebayo. And so it just fits in so many ways because his weakness is shooting in a way. But at the same time, I'd push back on that because I think if you go back and watch the tape, his level of difficulty again is a thematic thing with him. He takes very difficult shots and he makes them at a comfortable clip, considering the difficulty of the shot, how contested they are. He almost seems more comfortable taking contested step back threes than he does wide open catch and shoot threes, which is a fixable problem and kind of a fun problem to have. Like, I think that always turns into a really exciting and electric player. And so those kind of shot making skills combined with the ability to elevate the floor, space out the floor some more, and added size. When I think about putting even KJ, I think some people call him KJ. I'm not sure what I want to call him just yet, but putting him out there with Tyler, with perhaps Wiggins, Khalil Ware, and Bam, like that's a big lineup. Like Tyler's not very small. He's not a great defender, but it's long, it's lengthy. We can get more hands in passing lanes. There's just so many different things that he brings to the table in that way that I think is going to be really exciting for people. So those strengths definitely help elevate us possibly out of a bottom 10 offense? Like, could we get
Yeah.
to middle of the pack offense with a guy like this? I think so.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it'll probably be, year 2, 3 before he's able to lift an offense, but he
Yeah.
could definitely positively impact second units. And one thing I wanted to pivot back to that you mentioned that I think as a fan watching his development, you could argue this will kind of be the swing skill that, most heavily his entire outcome hinges on. And to me, that is going to be isolation scoring, which sounds funny for a pass first point guard. That shouldn't be that big of a deal. But I think, and not to compare these guys, but I think it'll be similar to the Halliburton conversation when he was coming out of the draft, which is like, yeah, he can operate in the pick and roll, but if he can't score off the dribble, why don't teams just switch onto him? Like, if I'm not afraid of, like, if he can't beat an NBA big off the dribble, then why am I worried about how good he is in pick and roll? I'll just switch. And I think that's going to be something to watch with Kasparas at Summer League. And then as his rookie year goes along, is one, can he attack mismatches? And
Mhm.
I think in a similar way, we used to talk about Tyler. People still talk about Austin Reeves. Like, you don't want those guys attacking their primary defenders one on one in isolation. That's not good basketball. But if
Yeah.
a team's trying to stash a wing or a big on him, or if they're just switching pick and rolls or switching bigs onto him, you just want, like Halliburton does, you want to see, okay, can he get to that step back, which we've seen he likes and can put in the bucket? Can he get to his step back, or can he blow by him? Can he draw a foul? So I think that'll be a big thing to watch. And then if anybody followed or has learned anything about Kasparas post draft, you'll know his big weakness, his big red flag in all his scouting was turnovers.
Mm.
And there's a lot of reasons a high usage guard is going to have turnovers in college. I'm not super scared about how many he had. Um, some it just looked like you said, Cooper Moorhead kind of went through it. That his teammates and him just weren't on the same page, or his teammates weren't really expecting the ball to get to them in certain places. You know, everyone in the NBA has played with high level passing at some point in their career. They'll get used to
Mm.
playing with him. To me, the handle is the swing skill that will need to be
Yeah.
improved. Some of that will come with strength, just not getting knocked off his spot, when he's getting bumped by defenders. But some of that will just need to be a bunch of work in the gym to get the handle really tight. Because you can't, if you're going to be a point guard in the NBA, you can't just have your pocket picked if somebody picks you up full court. You know, it's something you have to be able to handle pressure. And like you said, they'll ease him along. You know, Davion will handle the ball, Tyler will handle the ball. I think ideally, Tyler and Davion are bending the defense, swinging to Kasparas, and then he's able to attack bent defenses. And I think he'd be awesome
Mm.
at that because he can make
I
such
think he
quick
fits that so
reads.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, and then as he gets more comfortable doing that, then maybe it's a second unit with just he and Duncan, if we retain Duncan or whoever it might be. But you put more of a playmaking burden on him as he gets more comfortable. But yeah, and then the shooting, that's the other swing skill. For the first half of the college season, he was at like 41% from three, and that's when he was like top 6 pick territory. Then he had
Yeah.
a forearm injury and it cratered. He ended up like 31% from three for the season. So if you're an optimist, you're saying, well, he got hurt. He probably would have ended up like 38% or something if he hadn't had that injury. Of course, that's how I'm choosing to think, but we'll see what actually ends up happening. And then the defense that you touched on as well. He's not super, you know, quickly footed. He doesn't navigate screens super well, but a lot of defense can be taught, and he showed a ton of effort. And I think this is a guy
Mhm.
we could see taking a bunch of charges, being in the right places. I don't think he's going to generate a bunch of steals and blocks, but positionally, I think he could be good. And I think that kind of brings us to the end point, and this is looking way forward in the future, but offensively, I think if he develops how we think he will, Tyler, and Bam can definitely play together. Defensively is where I'm not sure he and Tyler can play
Mhm.
together because like we've seen, Tyler in a perfect world really needs like an elite defender next to him in the
Yeah.
backcourt, like we've seen with Davion, even Drew Smith for a brief period last year. Um, Kyle Lowry, Gabe Vincent, like he needs somebody to hound the other team's best point guard, and Kasparas, I think, won't be able to do that. I'd be really surprised. So that'll be the other thing to watch is for summer league and then just throughout the year is how much is he able to hold up defensively.
Yeah, I think that is going to be key for his break into the rotation because, you know, Spo will play, poor defenders. It's not like Jaime Jaquez Jr. is an amazing defender, and he gave him a lot of leash there, but it'll be important for him to bring that same intensity that he had in college because he does seem like a dog, and it's probably one of my favorite intangibles about him just from watching post-interview stuff, reading articles about what matters to him, and it's clear that he loves basketball, and like that's all that he loves. Like that is his main thing. It's what he does. He doesn't really spend time doing other things. It sounds like he is in the gym always. And so I like that, especially in somebody of his size. I think that combined with the size and the general IQ about how basketball works can turn into a really effective defender. And if so, it makes it easy to slot him next to Tyler. But even still, slotting him next to Davion is a great combination. I think those two would play really well together, either off the bench or just, in the rotations as the mix starts to happen throughout the game. Those are two guards that I can see complementing each other very well, especially with Davion's shooting as of late.
Yeah, that's something we have a ton of time to think about and monitor those things. But I am excited thinking about the rotation because if you're Spo, like you could make the rookie's life easier on offense by playing him with Tyler. Like we're talking about, Tyler bends the defense, and then Kasparas can work off that. But then your defense might be compromised, so maybe Kasparas is the first sub for Tyler. Then you have Davion. He can still take some ball handling pressure off of him, but Kasparas might have to do more heavy lifting offensively. But then he's insulated a little defensively. He's protected. Davion's picking up the toughest assignment. So that kind of stuff is going to be a lot of fun to monitor. I hope
Mhm.
we get some kind of bench unit that's like Jovic, Ware, Kasparas, probably Davion for defense, and then maybe a shooter, maybe Burks or Duncan. I think that would be just watching those guys run in transition,
Yeah.
lobs, kick out threes. I think, and to kind of conclude, it was a perfect pick for the Heat, in my opinion. Like there were other guys on the board that maybe could help more immediately, maybe made a little more sense on the roster. But to me, this was the guy that had the most upside that was still on the still available on the board and does fit a position of need for the Heat. So it's really a win-win. To me, it kind of felt like when Kim Whitmore slid in the Jaime Jaquez year, the Heat hadn't worked him out. We'd never really heard why
Mhm.
he slid so much, and now it's like, dang, it'd be cool to have Kim Whitmore. This felt similar. Kasparas slid further than we thought. He didn't work out for the Heat. The Heat tried to get him in. They didn't think he'd be there, so they didn't really prioritize working him out, and they just took him anyway. And I'm really pleased with that. I mean, I think as far as going into the draft with a 20th pick, leaving with a guy that a lot of people had as the 10th pick, that's great work by
Yeah.
Adam Simons, the whole scouting department, and
Hey,
very excited.
shout out to the Nets, shout out to the Trailblazers, I guess shout out maybe to the Suns. There are a lot of teams that did some weird stuff in the draft that allowed this to happen. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 guards that went before him. A lot of teams it was need, Not every team needs a guard like Kasparis right now in their current construction. That's just how the draft works. But I do think we got a little bit lucky in that regard, and
Yeah.
I'm super excited about it. So we'll take it.
Yeah, it sounded like Walter Clayton Jr. was getting drafted by the Heat at 20 if he was there. So I feel like we were probably saved by ourselves. I mean, maybe they still took Kasparis, would have taken him because they didn't expect him to be there. But if the Jazz hadn't traded up and taken Walter Clayton Jr., I would have been very nervous because I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
some promises were made to Rich Paul, and that could have gotten gross quick. And then, yeah, Brooklyn taking Nolan Traore, two guys, again, we talked about on the show, expecting to be in that range. They were, but Casper slid past both of them, so the Heat were able to pick him up. So very exciting times. And now that brings us to also I think Summer League starts in about 10 days. So Heat fans, you don't have to wait that
oh yeah,
long, and we get to see this young man on the court. We're going to be workshopping nicknames. Cass is a cool one. KJ's fun. Casper the friendly ghost. Casper the friendly
I heard
guard.
Casper.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
we'll work on some different things, but it's fun to have a Lithuanian guy on the roster. So now we can move into free agency. First, some housekeeping. The Heat were able to re-sign Davion Mitchell, 2 years, $24 million, so about 12 a year. His qualifying offer was 8 million. We don't know what his market really would have been because the Heat were able to get this done before free agency really started. If you don't know, under the new CBA, teams are able to sign their own free agents. And then if a team is trying to sign someone else's free agent, they have to wait until today, actually June 30th. So the Heat were able to get a head start on that, and they were able to get Davion in. Lena, what was your reaction to them being able to retain Davion?
It's a big win to me as far as in the context of what a big win can look like for the Miami Heat right now. Obviously, it's not a huge swing when it comes to free agency, but this is a guy who was great for us. I love Davion Mitchell. I think he's going to, if he gets to stick around for a while, I'm sure he'll be one of my favorite Heat players in a long time. And so, super excited that we get to keep him at least 1 to 2 more years. And I think it's a good contract. I think, and I think it's good for Davion. I think that's a good number that is not just a qualifying offer, shows that we value him and really reflects the type of player that he is right now in the league. So I think that was a good job by the front office just to clean that up and allow us to focus on other things in the meantime.
Definitely. Yeah, I was thrilled. I think it's Davion's very important to this roster. Just
Hmm.
being competent. Like I'm not saying he makes us a contender or anything, but we saw like that gap or anytime Davion just wasn't really available or the portion of the season where he wasn't on the roster and we were trying to figure out who was going to be in the backcourt with Tyler, especially to close games. I think Davion's so important for that. And like we alluded to earlier, I think he'll help Kasparas a lot. Another ball handler, somebody to
Hmm.
take tough defensive assignments. So yeah, 10 out of 10, $12 million a year for Davion. I feel like that's a great deal for both sides. I think, prior to the trade for the Heat, Davion was probably looking at a minimum this summer. So he was able to
Mhm.
make himself a lot of money. But I also think, if he really pushed it, he might have been able to get the full mid-level exception, which is like 14 million. So
Yeah.
I think they're able to find a good common ground, and I'm super excited to have Off Night back. He's such a fun player to watch, and
So
it's become
good.
a joke, but he embodies Heat culture. Like he is putting everything on the line out there to win, and it's really cool to see. So the next bit of news, and to me, this is the more interesting bit. And again, we're recording June 30th. So far, nothing has happened with this specific player. We'll see. So Duncan Robinson, we talked about this on some shows. We didn't expect this to happen, but he had an early termination option, which is essentially like a player option. It's rare because it can only be applied to the 5th year of a player's contract, and 5-year contracts just aren't given out very often now. But Duncan's was a 5-year contract. So he's entering the 5th year of his contract. Early termination option, to be clear, is for him. It's not for the team. So he can decide, I'm terminating my contract. I'm becoming a free agent. The last year of Duncan's contract was $20 million. $10 million of it was guaranteed. I'm assuming some conversations must have happened where the Heat were like, hey, man, we can't have you at 20 million this year. If you opt into this, we're probably just going to have to trade you to a team that's going to waive you. Or we'll have to non-guarantee your contract. So you only would be getting 10 million and then potentially waived and stretched. And then it would only be like 3 million on the Heat books, and Duncan could go sign somewhere else. So I'm assuming some internal conversations must have happened, and Duncan did indeed terminate his contract. So as of right now, as we're recording, Duncan Robinson is a free agent. Now, we have seen in other situations where there's a player option or a team option, this free agency, that guy will decline his option or the team will decline the option, and they'll announce his new deal in the same press release, essentially. Fred VanVleet is a team option. I believe they declined it and then signed him to like a 3-year deal or something. So the fact that the Heat didn't do that is interesting to me, because that could mean there's kind of a gray area to where like the Heat offered something that Duncan's going to be like, I'm going to go talk to everybody else, see if I can get anything more. If I can't, I'll come back. This deal is also interesting. It puts the Heat below the luxury tax. So they do have access to the full mid level, which is like 14 million. That's not nothing. We've seen Dorian Finney-Smith, Nikhil Alexander-Walker, a couple guys already signed for that are helpful players. So maybe the Heat are just done with the Duncan business. They're going to pivot to someone else. But right now, I don't see a lot of someone else's that would be more helpful than Duncan. So Lino,
Yeah.
I know, you know, I love Duncan. I know you love
You
Duncan.
love
That doesn't
Duncan.
mean we don't get frustrated with Duncan, but that also
Yeah.
means that we
Been
still
through a lot
appreciate
with Duncan.
it.
Yeah.
Really, like, I think
We've
other
just
than
been through a
Bam, the
lot.
longest tenured Heat player right now. So
Yeah,
I
we've
mean,
been through a lot with Duncan, and so it makes this whole situation emotionally charged in a way that is hard to ignore. Like you want to try to put the emotions away and think about what's best for the organization, and Duncan's going to do what's best for him. But at the same time, it's like, come on, this is our guy. He's done a lot for us. He's fallen short in a couple series and seasons, but for the most part, he's always done his best and really showed up and took a lot of tough shots for us and made a lot of tough shots for us. At this point in time, I'm inclined to feel that maybe we can do something different with this. What could possibly be a $14 million contract, absent of certain options. There are certain options I've been thinking through all weekend, and then we got to today, and all of them are gone for the most part, leaving players like Kuminga, or Jonathan Kuminga, maybe a few others that I'm not thinking of right now. But it just makes it really difficult to compare what we know we'll get from Duncan to what you like to call a mystery box. I am leaning towards voting for the mystery box just for the sake of, if we run it back, I'm gonna go insane. Like I'm gonna go crazy if the one opportunity where we had a relatively low stakes, like if we lost Duncan and the player we brought in was not as good as Duncan, that's not great, but it's at least showing a sign of life, and it's not killing us at the same time. It's not like we brought in a supermax contract and he sucked, and so now we're stuck. Like, okay, we bring in a guy for 14 million for 2 years. It's like, that's fine. Wish he was better, but it's a movable contract, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was like, it's risky because I do think Duncan is probably better than the field right now. But the potential, like Duncan's at his ceiling. Like the best we're going to get out of Duncan is behind us. And the potential of what could come from maybe a younger guy um, is more interesting to me going into this particular season. So that's where I'm at. It sounds like you want to keep Duncan and just give him whatever we can
Yeah.
give him without necessarily having to give him the full. That's the other thing is we don't necessarily have to give him the full 14. I think
Yes.
if he doesn't have any better offers, we can give him like 8, call it a
Yes.
day. But
Yeah, I think Duncan at 10 million a year is a very valuable player in my opinion, and a very tradable contract. If it's just not working or whatever reason, you could move that. But yeah, so to me, Duncan, I want to explain this so it doesn't sound like I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth. But in my opinion, the Heat right now should just lean young. They should try and develop young guys, build up their best players. And Duncan is not young. So you would say, okay, let him walk, sign a young guy. But Duncan's gravity, shooting, and spacing he provides for this roster, especially, I think might be so valuable to these young guys to making their life easier on the court that it's still worth retaining him. Because listen, if you take Duncan off this roster and Alec Burks is technically a free agent, you start lining up the best shooters on the Heat after Tyler, it gets scary. No pun intended. So that's why I'm a little fearful of just letting Duncan walk. And again, like you said, I don't want to run it back, but I'm hoping not running it back was like the Terry Rozier trade to bring in someone exciting, or maybe Rozier and Wiggins to bring in a big name. Duncan, I feel like, serves a really important role in this team. Now, listen, if we get priced out, we get priced out. You just shake his hand. Pleasure doing business with you. Wish you the best. And then maybe you're able to get Alec Burks back in the room, and he can do a little bit of what Duncan can do. Not as much movement shooting, but definitely still a deadly marksman. But I think it's going to be important for the Heat to try and retain him, hopefully at a number that's good for both sides. I think Duncan,
yeah,
I would lean towards it being more likely right now. I don't want to predict too much because by the time people hear this, it might be done. But Detroit has already kind of spent most of their money. They acquired Karis LeVert on a deal that I think was their mid level. So like that could have potentially gone to Duncan. Atlanta has spent their money. Denver spent their money. So Duncan is running out of landing places. We'll see what ends up happening there. So Duncan watch is officially on. Two more things I wanted to throw at you. So first, I think we need to talk about this because it's one of the funniest things that the Heat possibly could be involved in, and that is apparently there's mutual interest between the Heat and Jonathan Kuminga. Now, this is odd for all kinds of reasons. If people aren't familiar, Jonathan Kuminga, he's a young forward for the Warriors. He was a high draft pick. He hasn't really worked out. He doesn't fit well with their system. Steve Kerr benches him a lot, but he's very athletic. He has, upside athletically, talent wise, but doesn't have a lot of feel. Like we were talking about with Kasparas having a ton of feel. Kuminga does not have a ton of feel, and he can't really shoot. There's a lot of weird fit questions with him in Miami. He's a restricted free agent, which means technically whatever the Heat offer him, the Warriors could match. Also, if the Heat wanted Kuminga, why didn't they just make him a part of the Jimmy Butler deal? Like there were so many Heat Warriors conversations. Why did it not come up then? Is Kuminga's agent just using the Heat's name to try and drum up a better contract? Lino, Kuminga, what are your thoughts?
I had to pull up the stats again to remember. It felt like a jump scare looking at his 3-point shooting percentages. I was like, "Oh God, it's not great." I think he shot like 30% last year, and those were not exactly in one of the best shooting systems ever. We talked about Kasparas earlier, and his shooting percentages being low, but him taking really hard shots. Jonathan Kuminga gets to play next to the greatest shooter of all time and still can't manage to make threes. So that is not ideal. What I will say is, I think Spo has been able to do a lot with athletic, rangy wings like Kuminga. I think that is an archetype of player that Spo knows how to bring the best out of. I think the style of basketball we play is very different than the Warriors, and I think time has shown that not every player, despite their talent level, can fit and thrive in the Warriors system. Like it's not a bad system, it's just not for everybody, and it's particularly not for players who can't shoot. Whereas in Miami, you can get away with shooting like 33, 34% from three and be a pretty effective player there. You don't have to be a lights out shooter. Um, it's weird. I could see how we didn't trade for him originally, given that at the time we are like, what can we do to try to maximize our potential right now? Whereas at this point in time, we're in a completely different scenario where we need to decide what direction we're going to go as a franchise. And Jonathan Kaminga obviously fits a much younger vision. He's 22. And so that could be more helpful than having Andrew Wiggins and spending a bunch of money in that way. And it sounds like the Warriors might want Wiggins back. And we talked about how Kerr really loves Wiggins, was very sad when he was leaving. It's weird. I don't really love it, but I'd get behind it if it happened. It was like a sign of life is literally how much the Heat have whittled me down. Just like show me that you're doing something. Even if I don't agree with it, it's like that's something. We have an amazing coach and a great development team. This guy's still in that phase of his career where anything goes. Like he's not at the point where we know everything about what Kuminga is going to be for the rest of his career. There's still a lot for him to develop. He's got a lot of years still to figure that out. Um, I don't feel super hopeful that it's an incredibly high ceiling, but I do think it's probably higher than what he's experienced in Golden State so far.
I'm gonna say with the caveat that the contract is like under $20 million a year. I'm kind of into this. Like at
Yeah.
first, I was like, "Oh, gross! The spacing. How's he? He's gonna play the three next to Bam and Weir." And the more I thought about it, I was like, "Dude, we're going nowhere. This guy's young. He's athletic. He can get to the basket, something no one on this team can do, and he finishes very well at the basket. And everything else, TBD. But sometimes a change of scenery can help a guy. And again, the position the Heat are in, I mean, you can say how bad the East is, whatever. They're not close to winning a championship. Even if they're close to making the conference finals, even if they got to the finals, I don't think that would mean they were close to a championship, right? Like they're
Mhm.
not close to the Thunder. They're not close to the Rockets. So anyway,
Mhm.
I'm in on this. Again, I think the most likely scenario where the Heat get Kaminga is the Warriors don't want to pay him. There's no real market for him. And so he's like, listen, I'll just sign whatever it ends up being 2 years, 20 with a player option or something, or 2 years, 40 with a player option. Feature me, like give me minutes, give me responsibilities, let me showcase my worth. And then you'll have the inside track to keep me if I ball out. And if not, then hey, this is a good partnership. You at least gave me the opportunity to showcase my skills. That's my hope because we know the Warriors, they don't feature Kaminga a lot, especially with Jimmy and Draymond. They're not gonna,
Yeah. There's not
get.
room for whereas that's the other part of it. We need more wings. Like we used to be a
Mhm.
team chock full of just guys like Caleb Martin, Max Struess in a certain regard. Like we had these guys that just every player was a wing somehow for a while, and that was probably too far at a certain point in time. But I think we've dialed it back too much now, and we don't have that same level of general athleticism that I feel like usually shines through a Miami Heat basketball team. So he brings that in ways that we really need and would be fun to watch to a certain regard. I kind of like watching players who are a little chaotic. In the same way that like
Yeah,
Jovic was really fun to watch early, I was like, I don't know if this guy's going to be a good basketball player, but he's really fun and he's kind of crazy. And I feel much better about it now. It's like he's ironed some of that craziness out and he's going into a really fine basketball player so far. So that's what I'm hopeful for. If he can be on the Jovic track and we get to bear the fruits of that, then that would be pretty cool.
yeah. And I'm not trying to be too negative, but the offense is already terrible, man. Like, what's Kaminga gonna do? We're gonna go from 20th to 24th. All right.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
worth giving it a shot to me. And like he
Mhm.
hasn't been a great defender in Golden State, but like I trust Miami to get a pretty good defender out of somebody with that much athleticism with this coaching staff. Like that's something
Mhm.
I'm very confident the staff could do. And Rob Fodor is a good shooting coach. Maybe he could help Kaminga get up to like 36% from three. I don't know. But I'm in on it. It's the type of move I think the Heat should be making. Rehabilitation projects, second draft guys. I think those are smart things. Another quick
Yeah, I
thing
agree.
I want to address that has been rumored. I don't think there's anything super tangible happening right now, but apparently the Heat and the Lakers had some conversations about Andrew Wiggins. It's interesting to me. I would assume the motivating factor for the Heat is I assume it would be Rui Hachimura in the deal. Rui's on an expiring contract. Wiggins still has a couple years left on his deal, so that gets the Heat, to potentially a fair amount of money in free agency next summer. I would assume that would be
Mhm.
their motivation. It was reported that Heat were asking for a first round pick, so they wanted like Rui in a first for Wiggins. Actually, it might be Rui, Gabe Vincent in a first, which would be a fun reunion. And it sounds like those talks didn't really go anywhere. But I will say today, potentially things changed because Dorian Finney-Smith left the Lakers for the Houston Rockets. They were not able to retain Dorian Finney-Smith, so they are kind of a 3-and-D wing defender short now. So maybe they circle back. Maybe it's not a first, or maybe it's a protected first, but potentially maybe the Heat could extract some value from Wiggins. Again, like I think Wiggins is probably better than Rui, but at least we're accumulating assets. We can kind of
Yeah.
see the vision. We're getting extra picks. We're getting draft capital, things like that. So, how would you feel if that was something that he pursued?
That would be great. I like Wiggins. I'm not too mad if we keep him on the team. I think he, didn't have a great showing in the playoffs yesterday or yesterday, in the playoffs. And overall, I just wish that he would have done a little bit better because it would have been easier for me to go to bat for him just because I really like him as a player throughout his career. But right now, I'm like, I have such little feelings that we're going to be good this year. So why not get some draft assets? And if we want to be the next OKC and do it the way they did it, we got to start accumulating draft assets and we got to start getting younger to allow these type of players to develop in the way that they've done in Oklahoma City. So yeah, I wouldn't be too mad about it. I think it would be a really my cat's finally decided to sit down. I think it would be a really I like Rui also. I think that's another thing I should just say. I like him. He's not amazing, but I thought I was excited when the Lakers got him, and I'd be excited for him to wear a Miami Heat jersey. So yeah, hey,
Yeah.
maybe they'll
And
circle
again,
back.
I hate to sound pessimistic, but it's like, so before this trade, the Heat were the ninth seed and now they're at the 10th seed. Like, if you get an extra pick for that,
We're
sure.
gonna win
Why
our
not,
play-in
man?
games. Who cares?
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
gonna beat Chicago in the second round of the play-in, and we're gonna get swept. So
Yep. Playing
let it
champs,
rock.
baby. One other news item that has been mentioned by a couple different sources. I believe Jake Fisher for Yahoo was the most recent to acknowledge it. He was saying the Jazz are pretty motivated to trade John Collins. I think to free up some room for their young guys to play more, like Ace Bailey and different people that might be in their front court. John Collins is from the South Florida area. There have been John Collins Miami rumors for a long time. John Collins makes almost exactly the same amount of money as Terry Rozier, and their contracts are both expiring. John Collins to the Heat, Lino, how do you feel? Is it something you'd be interested in?
Yeah, I like John Collins too. I like guys who are relatively athletic and big, and they don't necessarily need to be super great at basketball if they're those things. I would love for us to just get more athletic, faster, stronger, whatever that Daft Punk song is. If they have all those attributes, just throw them in the roster, please, by
Yeah,
all means. And
I
if
mean,
we
hey,
can move off Terry Rozier, that's sick. That would be
yeah,
awesome. Shout out to
yeah,
Terry. Hopefully, you can revive your career under Mormon law and have a good time while you're out there. But yeah, I like John Collins. I don't see that happening. I think that Utah and Danny Ainge probably get some more value out of John Collins other than what we'd be able to provide or be willing to provide. Rather, I would probably not want to give up more than a straight up player for player situation.
yeah,
Maybe some seconds. Like I'm not super attached to our second round picks. I don't know how many we have coming forward. But right now, we need to be in the game of getting first. I don't want to send anything else that has a first attached to it unless it's for a Thompson brother or something insane, which neither of those guys are on the market. So those picks are staying with us.
yeah. I feel the same way. If they were able just to do a straight up swap, I mean, I guess if the Heat have to include like a second, Rozier,
Mhm.
love him to death, was pretty much a zero last year, if not a total negative. So, I mean, maybe Collins could be better than that. So, I guess you could talk yourself into it being a second for that. Also, I need the guard room cleared up for Kasparas. Like I don't
Yeah.
need Spo being tempted by giving Terry another chance.
Oh my
Whereas Collins,
gosh. I will drive down to South Florida. I will show up to the facilities if we get 25 minutes of Terry Rozier a night when KJ is right there for the taking.
so and listen, as I'm sure all our listeners could tell, we're dying to talk ourselves into something positive. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, listen, John Collins. I talked about Gerson Ubaseli in our first like free agency preview as like our third big because he can shoot a little bit. He could play, beside Bam and Ware. Collins could do that. Collins had some years where he shot it. He's athletic. He could just be, whichever one of Bam and Ware isn't on the floor. Collins could just be that other guy. And then if he's terrible, you'd always have Haywood to just throw in there and pretend he's 6'9" and just let him be our power forward. So that's
Yep.
that's where I'm at. So Heat fans, we're it's been about 3 hours since free agency opened. So still no Duncan deal, still no Kaminga deal. Those are the two things I'll probably be watching most closely as a Heat fan. But yeah, to open it up, Lino, we just have a few minutes left here. The Hawks have signed Nikhil Alexander Walker, Luke Kennard. The Magic added Desmond Bain and signed Tyus Jones today. The East, it's people keep saying how weak it is, and it is compared to the West, but I don't want Heat fans to trick themselves into where they fall in the hierarchy because I'm not sure they're not like I think they'll still be a play-in team, barring something very
Yeah.
unexpected. Does that feel fair to you?
Yeah, no, I think our biggest aspirations might be a seventh seed. Like everything's going well. The roster that we had constructed last year finally gets to fire off on all cylinders after getting a full season together. KJ is immediately available and ready and contributing, obviously, not lifting our whole offense, but if we just have a sound backup guard there to share the floor with Davion and Tyler, there's still 6 teams that are better than us anyways. So that does not help. Had the Hawks not had such a successful draft and free agency so far, maybe I'd feel better. If Orlando hadn't got Desmond Bain, maybe I'd feel better. But those two teams in particular are going to slot in almost immediately where Boston and the Sixers may be. And the Sixers may be healthy again too. So we'll see. But with Milwaukee missing Dame, Boston missing Tatum, you might want to get excited that the Heat can just get in the mix, but unfortunately, we're not the only ones. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't want to get too negative, but I mean the Heat were the 10 seed last year, and that was with Jimmy Butler for a few games. So I'm not sure how confident I feel the Heat would be better than even the Bucks. Like Giannis is so good. Could he just
yeah,
will that team to be better than the Heat? Same thing with
he could
Boston.
will that
Like
team to at least for like 40 wins. So,
right in Boston, like I mean, Derek White and Jalen Brown are still very good. You could argue. Well, I don't want to. Anyway, you could argue they're
we
better
won't
than
go
any
there.
two players on the Heat. Potentially. So I'd probably take Bam over Derek White or whatever. We don't need to get into it. But my point is, like, the Tatum injury, the Lillard injury, the Halliburton injury. I feel like people are just saying like, oh, these teams are going to win 15 games now. Like, there's a chance these teams are still like scrappy and competitive. Like, I don't
There's
think
a
it's a given.
chance we have to play Milwaukee or Boston at worst. At their worst, we probably had to play them in the play-in. Like,
Yeah.
great, we're going to
Right.
lose.
And then in, Philly could potentially be better. I mean, they'll be better probably because I just don't think there's anywhere they could be as hurt. They still will probably deal with a lot of injuries. And then you have the Knicks and the Cavs, the Magic, the Pistons will be better. So again, I get why Heat fans are like, oh, the East is wide open. We're missing this huge opportunity. But we're still pretty far from even being competitive in the East. And then B, it's like, okay, you make it out of the East. Heat fans are familiar. Sometimes you make it out of the East and you find out, like, oh, we've been out of the East. We're not close to a championship. Like in
Yeah.
2023, the Heat made the finals. I don't know if they were really close to a championship. That series never felt like we scared Denver. So anyway, a little bit of a negative note to land on, but I do think I think all Heat fans want a direction. I think
Yeah.
ultimately is how everyone feels right now. They want us to the team to pick a direction, ideally young, because I don't think there's like an all in move that makes sense. It sounds like Morant, Trey Young, Zion, all these different guys we talked about. It sounds like they're all staying. Durant's already in Houston. They can't get Giannis, I don't think. So it's like, yeah, man, you might as well just kind of stand pat, and then maybe you develop a guy that can be a part of the Giannis package or something like that. So those are kind of my closing thoughts. You have anything else for the people?
No, I think while it does sound that we're being very negative, I think we really just want to manage expectations for everybody and get you guys excited to root on some young guys who are developing. Like, this is probably a time to focus less on what Tyler and Bam are doing for us going into the season and where they're going to carry us to, and really locking in on guys like Khalil Ware, Pella Larson, our new draft pick, any young guys that we do bring in. That's going to be where all the excitement is. Like, being able to see a vision of them 2, 3 years when our window is back open. Because right now it seems pretty candidly closed. And it seems like there's just other teams, it's their window. Like, the Hawks are probably about to ramp up into, after being pretty mediocre for the past 5 years, maybe they are having another chance. Orlando has been in shambles for what feels like a decade now, and they're finally getting another chance. Ideally, what we can pray for is that this time of purgatory is not as long as these other organizations, and historically that has been the case. We're not bad for that long. This team does figure out ways to rebound relatively fast compared to other organizations. So this is just going to be one of those years. And so find excitement and joy in the team where you can. Root on the guys because they're on the roster anyways. And we'll see what happens and see what players we'll be rooting for moving forward this summer.
Yeah, and we're really burying the league. We're talking about the reigning, defending Summer League champions. We're going back to back, baby. We're going to be
Oh, yeah.
locked in every Summer League game, breakdown analysis. You guys get excited. We're going to chart every
We're going.
Kasparas turnover and figure out why it's not his fault, actually.
We're pushing
So
the narrative, baby.
that's right. So thank you guys for tuning in. We'll definitely do an emergency episode if anything crazy happens. If not, we will continue to put out episodes every other week or so, probably keep you guys updated on what's going on. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment if you can on the different platforms. Let a friend know, let a Heat fan friend know. And we hope to hear from you guys in the comments, and you will be hearing from us in the very near future. For myself, Micah, my good friend Lino, thank you for listening. We will see you guys next time.